What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to my channel, Alchemist 8. Justin here, and bring you another little nugget to add to the Soul Tribe archive. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the South Node in Aquarius in the 12th house. Now, when you talk about the South Nodes, or just the nodes in general, the North and the South Node are always talked about, usually together since they are always opposite one another. So they have a very intimate relationship. They're the eclipse points. But what I like to think of the South Node, where the North Node, you can think about it as where you're going, it's uncharted territory. The South Node is where you've been. This could be where you go to call upon wisdom and reflect on the actions that you've taken thus far, and that determines the trajectory that you want to do when you're going to address that North Node energy. So it's a very, really kind of important point when we're working with the South Node. The South Node, you can hear it in modern times maybe referred to as kind of like the past lives and things like that. But even if that's not something that you maybe resonate with, like I think an even more grounded approach, or at least how I like to go about it, thinking of past lives, in my case, that can be when I was 5 years old, that could be 10 years old, 15, 20, 25. Those would be past lives for me, thinking about those different chapters in one's life and how to grow going forward from that. So yeah, it's a nice regrouping sort of energy. But the one caveat with the South Node is that maybe there could be a tendency to stay in that comfort zone, because sometimes I like to if you look at the glyph of the South Node, it almost looks like a cauldron or a bowl, and where it's like where the South Node is collecting things, the North Node is dumping things out. So you got to look sometimes where there may be some things that may no longer be working with you. So we'll definitely talk about that more with this placement in particular. But let's talk about Aquarius, because Aquarius traditionally they are ruled by the the big old Saturn, and they are the fixed air sign, and they are active or yang in nature. And when you think about it, it really makes a lot of sense with Saturn being their ruler. Saturn gives things form, requires discipline, and Aquarius I like to think of them as the visionaries. With them because the air deals with the thoughts, we're getting into communication in the mind, and I find that there's an incredible focus with Aquarius. I think with them in particular, if you can hold it in your head, you can hold it in your hand with them. Saturn will give those ideas and those thoughts form. So there's a really powerful mind with Aquarius. I find maybe even like a future sight that they can see things that other people maybe can't even possibly fantasize in that moment. It takes a time for maybe other energies to catch up with that. So really great gift when you think about Aquarius energy. And then we get to the 12th house. The 12th house in the ancient astrology was known as the house of bad spirit. And some of the things, I actually have my South Node here too, just in Cancer. But some of the themes that the 12th house covers are going to be its enemies, but more so kind of like those hidden enemies, those like bad spirit, that inner demons that we may wrestle with sometimes. Because this can also deal with like misfortunes, imprisonment, isolation, great illnesses, sorrow, sufferings, tribulations, toils, just really just a wonderful hodgepodge of topics. But it's just one of those aspects that happen to come up in life, and it doesn't mean you're doomed. We'll talk about that in a moment, but when you're working with this placement, a couple of things to consider. One, you'd have a Pisces rising by whole sign, and you're going to want to look to see where Saturn is at, because Saturn is going to be responsible for this house and of your 11th house, which deals with like your friends, groups, alliances, your hopes and dreams and aspirations for the future. Both of these themes are going to flow to wherever house Saturn is. So you want to get eyes on Saturn. But one thing that I would talk about with this, and anytime I ever talk about 12th house placements, 12th house stuff is tough, and this is like a more kind of health axis that we're dealing with. And one thing that you're going to want to pay attention to are your thoughts with Aquarius, especially with Aquarius, because I think that of the air signs, they're the fixed signs. When they hold a thought, it can be hard to let that thing go. They can think of it that's almost like the law. And you want to be careful with that when you're getting into those maybe like times of misfortune, sorrows and things. And pay attention to those sort of conversation where it's like, man, this always seems to happen. Why don't I ever seem to get a break? This never goes my way. Because you keep staying in those head spaces, then that future will continue to be what realizes. Our thoughts are very powerful, and our thoughts become things. And so I would say, if that's something that you really have trouble with, maybe you've been holding on to some past, whatever, any sort of like tough times in life. Maybe you are going through some sort of, maybe dealing with some sort of illness, because again, it could be any sort of like chronic illness that the 12th house is dealing with. Having some sort of healthcare professional to help you with that, whether it be a therapist, doctors, and then having different, and not just, I think, having those kind of medical professionals with you as well, but I think having different practices outside of that, having other holistic practices, maybe doing like different sort of like breath work, exploring meditation, really. And the 12th house deals with, when we're talking about themes of like isolation and maybe imprisonment, this could be a time where maybe you need to reflect, especially when you're going through those times. Think about how you've been, where your thoughts are at. Journaling, I think could be a really great thing for this placement, to help you navigate these chapters in life, because we all go through 12th house things, and that's going to be something too that you want to consider. This is just not you receiving all of this stuff, this sorry, the universe is not just dumping on you, but this is also when other people are going through 12th house things and you taking on their baggage as well. I don't want to say baggage, but when they're working through their things, that's something you want to see too, and pay attention to how that affects your mind and how that maybe has affected your energy levels, which we'll talk about more when we talk about the North Node in Leo tomorrow. But, well, depending on when you're watching this, but that is something that I would say is, would be very important. Look at considering that Saturn rules this in your house of groups, pay attention to the groups that you've been rolling with. Have they been something that has been promoting your, been promoting growth? And it's one thing for people to go through stuff, of course, but if you've become a dumping ground for people's problems and you don't have time to work through these things yourself, that's just going to add, it's just going to pile on, and then things get murky, the thoughts get all, you know what I mean? And it just becomes this just like soup. So you want to just make sure that you do, have people that you're talking with, of course, with this. I think especially with air signs, but also make sure that you have some private time just to kind of navigate, to see where maybe you have been getting a little caught up, or maybe you've been getting into like some self-fulfilling prophecies, things along those lines. Those would be observing, because journaling especially, I think, can be a very powerful tool, because then you can really see, or even doing like a video recording, that could be something too, where if you're really trying to understand what's going on, if you're trying to hear the inner dialogue, just talk with yourself, and then observe that video afterward. Pay attention to any sort of, is there tension that you're holding in the body, all these sort of things. And then this gives you really great notes, really great feedback, and so that when you go through these 12th house themes in life, you become better equipped, because where those chapters in life are, they can be hard, but the more that we've developed the coping mechanisms, and healthy coping mechanisms, to help us process and form those healthy relationships that help us move through this stuff, the easier that these transits get, and the easier that having these placements get, especially maybe if you have maybe a stellium in Aquarius with this. But I do think that this is not just like this. This is one where I find this when the nodes fall on this axis, that people who have this tend to be ones that help as well, where people will look to them for guidance, because it is something that is on the mind, possibly, again, depending on if it's resonating with you. And so people will look to you for guidance. People will look to you to get to maybe help change their point of views. And that's another thing, I think, that when you get on that wavelength where you're able to, like, okay, I know that this isn't forever. The idea this is a tough point, but when we get through this, having that sort of mentality, that sort of surety and certainty, when you're talking about that with others, can really, I think, help enliven their future, help them bring hope. Aquarius, this is just a little sidebar here. Aquarius energy is associated with the star, which can be unexpected help, hopes, dreams, visions, the clear view. So, you can be a guiding star for someone down the line. And, not just even if you don't do this in like a professional for like your, as like a job or as like a career or something along those lines, this could just affect those people in your everyday sphere as well. So, the 12th house doesn't just have to be some sort of like life sentence or anything like that. It can really be, there can be a lot of gold in these, and even those tougher houses as well. It just depends on how you work with them. So, but these would be just some things, 12, so 12, one 12th house south node to another. But these would just be just some base things that I would talk about with someone with this placement. You definitely need the whole chart to get a clear picture of this. And if that's something that you want to do, want to work more, get more familiar with these placements, see how they've come up in your chart, where maybe been some pitfalls that you've been getting into, whatever that might look like. Down in the description box is a link for the services that I provide and the prices for them. If you have any questions about just any of that stuff, my email's down there as well. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'll get back to you, of course. But also, too, if you happen to have this placement, in the comment section, if you feel comfortable with this, let us know how you've been navigating this experience, because I think that especially for like 6th house, 12th house, even 8th house things, we need that support, that sense of 12th house community in a sense, so that we all can know that, that we can get through this together, and, see what tools have worked for you, and maybe that can give people some other ideas, some things to work with as well. So yeah, just if you feel comfortable with that, definitely leave a comment down there. And then also in the description box, there is a link for my other channel, the Chariot Friends, where I talk about the lunar astrology and do a tarot card reading and an I-Ching reading at the end of that. So that's something there for you. But also on this channel as well, if you want to monitor where the celestial bodies are transiting, I have videos that come out every Mercury day. That's on a Wednesday. And they just talk about that and how to work with the celestial bodies, the chit-chat that's going on up in the sky, and how to put those energies into practical application. So that's available for you. But until next time, stay mindful out there. Keep raising that vibration through the roof. And I will catch you on the next one. Later.